We have with us Dr. Beloo Mehra from AuroBharati Sri-Aurobindo Society in Pondicherry, who is collaborating with us. On behalf of Sri-Aurobindo Integral Life Center, Auro University, and on behalf of Sri Renaissance AuroBharati Sri-Aurobindo Society, it is my pleasure to welcome all of you. I want to give brief, introduction what Sri-Aurobindo Integral Life Center, and I'll request Beluji also to give brief idea about her center. But I just take liberty of sharing some introduction of Sri-Aurobindo Integral Life Center. We are at Surat, our university is Surat, and this is founded by Sri Hasmukh P. Rama, Chancellor of our university. It is established on the premise of our university and the only university in the world established for making one realize the integral education of Sri-Aurobindo and the mother in higher learning. The center is dedicated to Sri-Aurobindo in realizing his vision and thought on integral life. It aspires to be a global hub for study and research in Sri-Aurobindo and his philosophy, vision, and work. It aims to help all those interested in human future to reach the new consciousness that Sri-Aurobindo and the mother have foregrounded. Today, what the project we are all of us are joined is the objective of this project is to study spiritual foundation of Indian art and culture in the light of Sri-Aurobindo and his contemporary. As we are in the era of transformation of the modern man who is engrossed into existential dilemma of the material world, it becomes imperative to study the roots of spirituality to remain in the present and design the future. And to find the roots of spirituality, one has to dive deep to explore Indian culture. Sri-Aurobindo viewed this Indian culture as an expression of the spiritual essence and evolutionary destiny of the country, describing ancient Indian civilization as it characterized by a spiritual cultural unity. He explained that the core of India's cultural foundations was the seeking of ultimate truth and realization of the divine. Sri-Aurobindo saw India's cultural heritage as source of universal wisdom that could contribute to the spiritual progress of humanity. He emphasized the need for India to rediscover and revive the spiritual heritage in order to fulfill its spiritual destiny and being about a new era of human evolution. I quote from the book Renaissance in India. The spirituality is indeed the master key of Indian mind. The sense of the infinite is native to it. India saw from the beginning, and even in her age of reason and her age of increasing ignorance, she never lost hold of its insight. That life cannot be rightly seen in the soul light, cannot be perfectly lived in the soul power of its externalities. She was alive to the greatness of material laws and forces. She had keen eye for the importance of physical sciences. She knew how to organize the arts of ordinary life. What a profound thought Aurobindo puts in Renaissance. India has unique spiritual heritage that can provide a powerful foundation for its cultural and social development, and that by rediscovering and revitalizing this heritage, India can achieve a new sense of national identity and purpose. The spiritual problem of modern men must be approached in a unique manner. Sri-Aurobindo observed that India possessed a dual nature. On one hand, it had rich cultural and spiritual heritage, and on the other hand, it had been oppressed and subjugated by colonial power of centuries. In order to create new cultural identity for the nation, Sri-Aurobindo believed that Indians needed to overcome the psychological and spiritual effects of colonialism and rediscover their unique cultural identity. And Sri-Aurobindo's philosophy, an important point is that all issue of life arise from a lack of harmony. To bring that about harmony, one must strive to think and live integrally. An individual progress spiritually, the task of achieving spiritual integration becomes even more critical. Art as a human endeavor offer promises as a means to overcome this challenge. Sri Aurobindo's philosophical anthropology recognizes spiritual integration as an inherent difficulty of human conditions, while emphasizing the potential of art as a solution. Art can serve as a bridge between the individual and the collective, allowing people to express their individuality while also connecting them to the larger community. The character or Swabha of India is founded on self realization and self expression through various forms of art. Beneath this process of learning and expressing oneself, there is a subtle element that is visible in all forms of art. Spirituality, which is the identity of India. The arts in India are not just a means of entertainment or expression, but they hold a deep spiritual significance that connects the individual to the divine. Through dance, music, painting, and other art forms, people can transcend their individual selves and connect with something larger, tapping into spiritual energy that is inherent to the country. Sri Aurobindo's philosophy emphasizes the significance of art in transcending the difficulties that are inherent in the human condition and achieving spiritual harmony. The arts in India, with its rich cultural and spiritual heritage, provide an avenue for individuals to connect with something larger and to overcome the sense of fragmentation that is prevalent in modern society. By recognizing the spiritual dimension of art, people can experience a sense of unity and connectedness that is essential to human experience. India's artistic heritage is deeply intertwined with spirituality, with its influence evident in various forms of arts such as literature, painting, sculpture, architecture, and performing arts too. The spiritual tradition of Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sufism have all contributed to shaping this symbolism, themes, and aesthetic vision seen in Indian art. Indian temple architecture and sculpture are considered the highest expression of the spiritual basis of Indian culture, showing intricate details and rich colors. The long tradition of painting in India, from the Ajanta murals to the miniature style of the Mughal and Rajasthani schools, also reflects the influence of spirituality in of Indian art. Religious and spiritual themes dominate much of India's greatest works of art, while the classical dance such as Bharatanatyam, Kuchipudi, Kathak convey spiritual messages through intricate gestures and movements. Indian classical music, which finds its origin in Samveda, is also well known for its ability to take both musician and listener to spiritual ecstasy. To create new cultural identity for India, there needs to be deep reconnection with its ancient traditions. The integration of these traditions into modern Indian life is essential for growth and development of harmonious and connected society. Therefore, recognizing the spiritual dimension of art and embracing India's artistic heritage can play a significant role in achieving the goal. With this preface, we are starting with Sri Aurobindo's work. We are going to explore Sri Aurobindo's work through Renaissance in India and other essays on Indian culture. I invite all of you to participate actively and contribute by your papers, by your articles, or even through PPT or through notes or through this discussion also, deeply, so that we can explore and we go back in the past, remain in present, and understand our future, so that we see what Sri Aurobindo was visualizing. The methodology is this, that right now Dr. Beloo ji will be leading this session by exploring the book Renaissance by Sri Aurobindo, and thereafter for 2 more sessions she will be continuing. And if you want to participate in this discourse, please share your you can write a mail You can put it in chat box also, and you can call. The number will be shared in chat, in chat icon. So you can contact us. You can contact Beloo also. You can contact the number which will be shared here in Zoom meeting chat. And otherwise, the best part is you write a mail on info.clc, which will be shared by our coordinator Satya. I invite all of you to be active listener and active participant. And this is a major project work which we are doing. We are inviting, if you know somebody in your, group, you can ask them to join. You can invite students of yours also, and they can share by doing some research work. Whatever the talk which we will be sharing here, whatever the articles you will be sharing with us, this will come as a book form later on. So we will go through thoroughly, and we'll select also. Selection procedure will be there, and that will be conveyed through the mail ID. With this note and with this preface, I invite Dr. Beloo Mehra ji to continue with this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Kiranji, for this very wonderful introduction and giving a kind of like, you use the word preface. It really is that, I mean, in a way, it sets the stage for as to why we are taking on this project. Because as will be slowly revealed, there are many layers to this project. This study group is the starting point. In a way, we are like, immersing ourselves into words of Sri Aurobindo and on this topic of Indian art. And once we are immersed and once our consciousness is soaked into that, we will be slowly revealing other layers to the project, which will involve actual very active interaction and hands-on work with artists, inviting artists to be part of our project as well. So slowly and slowly, things will be, the big other layers of the project will be revealed. I see Srinivas Muluguji has also joined. Welcome, Srinivas ji. So I think with that, what I thought I will do for this session is to give an introduction to few aspects of what Sri Aurobindo has said about the spiritual basis of Indian art, the spiritual foundations of Indian art. And there is no like fixed agenda that I have to finish 20 slides or whatever, but we'll go slow. And it's more of an introductory thing. Next week, we'll dig a little deeper. I'll take longer passages from Sri Aurobindo's works. So as an introduction, I've taken some small quotes with some pictures. So allow me to share my screen. Is this visible? This should be visible now, right? Yes, Satya?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay, great. So Indian art and aesthetics in the light of Sri Aurobindo. That's how we will start. And I've had privilege of talking about this topic at few other forums in the past as well, including Auro. And this has, I don't know, for some reason, this has become my favorite painting to start with. This is Preeti Dee's painting, an ashram artist who was trained by the mother, who many of you may already know, was an accomplished artist, accomplished painter herself. And it's titled Realm of Gold. And it's currently there in the original, in the room where I was just at half an hour ago in Sri Aurobindo Society. I know Kiranji said to speak a little bit about Sri Aurobindo Society or AuroBharati and the work that I do there. Basically, I don't think I want to interrupt the flow of the presentation now. Maybe later on, when Satya tells me, it's time to close, maybe that time I will say a little word. So I was just in the room where this painting is. So it was very, beautiful to look at it in real again. And the discussion that we were having in the room just half an hour ago was yogic relationship with money. And so from money, which is also part of in Sri Aurobindo's all life is yoga, money plays. I mean, he talks about money, he's talked about it. And then on this side is the art. And often in modern realms, these two don't come together. And yet, in the age that we live in, there is also something to be said about the commercialism of art. So as Kiranji was saying, if we need to go back to what was best in our culture, what were the best values, the best foundations on which our culture was built up, art was supposed to be the highest expression of the soul. And the way Sri Aurobindo defines culture, art, is in that higher mind's expression, the higher vitals expression of the being. So whatever the highest values, the highest ideals, the upward will of the people that were part of the soul of Indian culture, those ideals dictated or were expressed through the highest expressions of art. So this painting in particular, which is titled Realm of Gold, it's Sri Aurobindo gazing into infinity. It somehow kind of, brings back this idea that from the infinite, the artist seeks the inspiration to express something in finite form. This is what is at the core of Indian art. But let me also begin with this, just one anecdote from Sri Aurobindo's conversation once, when somebody asked Nirodharan, who was his doctor as well as scribe, the way Rishi Vyas had Ganesha as his scribe for Mahabharata, Sri Aurobindo had Nirodha as his scribe for Savitri. And when Nirodha asked him, where do you get your beautiful sense of humor? Sri Aurobindo said simply, Raso Vai Saha. Verily, he is delight. Supreme is the delight. So all creation, all manifestation in the Indian view of existence comes from Ananda, comes from delight and seeks delight through all finite expressions. There is that seeking of infinite, which is equivalent to the seeking of delight. So this is very closely connected with the way India has understood its artistic and aesthetic culture. So if Sachidanand is the highest conception the Indian spiritual mind has come up with to, if I can use the word define, or to speak of as the supreme, whatever the supreme being is, the supreme consciousness is, Sat Chit Ananda. The Ananda is that which expresses through beauty. And in fact, when we come to integral yoga of Sri Aurobindo and the mother, if you look at Sri Aurobindo's, the mantra he has on Anandamayi Chaitanyamayi Satyamayi Parme, Ananda even becomes, it takes the first place. So Sat Chit Anand, and there you have Anand, Chit, and Satya. So Ananda is the source, and everything is seeking that Ananda through all works that we do, through all experiences that we go through. And beauty, as Mother said, in the physical realm, on the physical plane of consciousness, is the form in which Ananda expresses itself. So these are some of the core ideas of Indian foundations or spiritual foundations of Indian art. And as Sri Aurobindo again points out at another place, about the whole manifestation being the dance of Shiva. So, the Tandava, the Ananda Tandava and the Laya coming together, or the Ishvara and the Ishwari, or the Purusha or Shakti, Shiva or Shakti coming together to, in this ecstasy, in the dance of Ananda. And that's how the manifestation comes together. So art has been, or artistic, or we can say like the aesthetic side of even philosophy has been at the core of the way India understands existence, the way Indian highest mind has spoken of what is reality, what is existence. So moving right along, just few inspirations from Sri Aurobindo as we move towards, going deeper and deeper into our collective study here. Just this beautiful line where Sri Aurobindo defines, how do you know that God has walked on some place? There is the footprint of beauty. Beauty is his footprint showing us he has passed from there. It's just a beautiful line. And in another place, Kiranji was talking about the literary culture of India, and how through literature also, the same spirituality comes through. I just picked as an example one line from one of Sri Aurobindo's own poem, The Divine Hearing, which is one of my most favorite lines, where he says, "A secret harmony steals through the blind heart, and all grows beautiful because thou art." Because Supreme is, because she is, this is why everything is so beautiful. So the idea of beauty, the highest divine beauty, the highest artistic expression of beauty, and the highest conception of the Supreme have been fused together beautifully in this integral vision of Indian culture. So oneness of beauty and delight is quintessential aspect of the Indian views on art, beauty, and art appreciation. So many of you may know already about this particular artist, but if you don't, let me just quickly tell his name. His name is Keshav. He is famous for doing a Krishna every day. But for the last 2 days, he has been focusing on Ramayan, Ram Navami coming together tomorrow. So he's been focusing usually during Navratras, especially the ones that come in the other set of Navratra. He does series on Devis, the now Devi, but this time he's focusing on Ramayana for the last 2-3 days. But he's known as for Krishna for today. If you Google him, that's how you will find his works. And this is where he's depicting Sri Krishna giving Divya Chakshu to Arjun. But you see, the essence is there, the eternal spirit is there, but the forms are new. With the expression is also new. He has actually also made very cubist expression to the same eternal, like incidents from Gita or Bhagavad Puran or Mahabharat stories, or like I said, Devi stories, but using very new forms of painting tradition. So, but with this very focus of beauty and delight, the coming together of beauty and delight. Again, just to go back to the source, which is our inspiration for this collective study, the Renaissance in India. And this is a beautiful passage from Sri Aurobindo, where he says, the Vedas and the Upanishads are not only the sufficient fountainhead of Indian philosophy and religion, but of all Indian art, poetry, and literature. So very clear, very explicit, no ifs and buts. So maybe through our project, we will be able to reveal, through the various artists that we bring in our project, and the way, I see myself also as wanting to take part with those artist residencies that we are able to put together, with Mother's grace. So that way we not only just talk about it, but actually experience it along with the facilitators, the artists who will lead us to realize this thing, that how the truths of Vedas and Upanishads are being expressed through all Indian art, poetry, and literature. So maybe we'll also bring in some poets and some literary figures also as we go along. This is a long-term project that we are embarking on. So I'll just quickly go through this. And as Sri Aurobindo says later, it was the truths of Vedas and Upanishads, the temperament, the ideal, that the mind that formed and expressed in them, which later carved out the great philosophies, the Shad Darshana, built the structure of the Dharma. What is this Dharma, Sanatan Dharma? Recorded its heroic youth in the Mahabharata and Ramayana. So in all, and then it continues with many original intuitions in science, created so rich a glow of aesthetic and vital and sensuous experience, renewed its spiritual and psychic experience in Tantra and Purana, and then he continues, even in other literature that came in other languages. So the point being is that the core of all Indian cultural accomplishments, whether in the fields of arts or even in the fields of sciences, or in the many aesthetic, vital, sensuous experience Kiranji was talking about, India also knew how to make art out of ordinary life experiences. So the 64 Kala concept that we had, which included, if you look at Vatsyayan's Kama Shastra, included things like making a bed, making flower garlands, even things like, adorning your hair with flowers. So those kinds of things were also given the status of art. They were not, the distinction between art and craft was not there as we see today, that this is, cottage art, or this is folk art or folk traditions. Even the idea of what was classical music or Deshi or, Margi music, that those distinctions came later. So all art integrally was an expression of the truths that the rishis and seers had spoken of in right from the Vedic times. This is what Sri Aurobindo is emphasizing this very early on in his discussion on Indian art. So just going through very quickly, the sacred roots of Indian art. We think about the Vedic period or even pre-Vedic period, that there was no temple worship, or these things came later, but yet there was the idea of aesthetic expression or the artistic expression. And at one place, E.B. Harrell, whom Sri Aurobindo quotes at several places in his early on book, The Ideals of Indian Art, speaks of that the rishis, the Vedic seers, who sung of the highest states of consciousness through the hymns, through the chants, that itself was an artistic expression, because they were able to see the truth behind the nature's outer forms. So when they were seeing things like Surya, sun, or rain, they were not just talking about Indra as the god of rain or Indra as the god of thunder. They were able to realize the spirit behind the outer natural forms. So in that process of expressing that through highest kind of mantric poetry, they gave to India monuments more durable than bronze. So those were the first artists in that sense. Certainly their expression was highest level of poetry, highest level of mantric poetry that Sri Aurobindo speaks about in his other work on poetry, the future poetry. So right from the Vedic period, we've had this idea that the highest truths are best expressed in the artistic way. And on the screen, I just had few examples, the cave arts and the Pashupati seal. And even in the rituals, the whole Vedic yagna, even if you just look at the outer ritual, you see a beautiful aesthetic expression. Not just that, even engineering, how the Yagyashala was built, how the Vedi was built. I mean, there was precision in that. So those things were part of our heritage. All arts were seen as vehicles of beauty, which will provide both pleasure and education through refinement of senses and sense perceptions. So this idea that art has to serve a wonderful purpose in human development was also recognized. And Sri Aurobindo has spoken of that in his other set of essays called National Value of Art, which those of you who are working in the arts field, I would highly recommend. But maybe if time permits, at some point in our study circle, we'll briefly speak about that. The idea that one who does not appreciate literature, art, beauty is as good as an animal was precisely spoken of by King Bhartrihari in his Niti Shatakam, in his Century of Life that Sri Aurobindo also translated. So the idea that he's as good as a beast, as an animal, if you don't have an appreciation for what is refined, what is beautiful, what is music, what is literature. So they are animals, except that they don't have the tail. That's what this particular shloka says. And also the idea that arts are, there was an integral vision of art. The one who would be interested in sculpture would naturally develop and some sort of appreciation and even skill in painting or some kind of performing art. So there are stories that are there which describe this interdependence, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into the stories, but the idea that all arts are connected, there is an interdependence and some sort of a unity there was very much understood both in two of our major texts, Natyashastra and Vishnu. Maybe in the group, I see that Satya also created that WhatsApp group. Maybe I'll share those stories there. Then we also have stories which speak about, maybe this also, I'll actually probably share some things from this in the WhatsApp group itself, instead of taking time here. So there are a couple of stories that also speak about how all art comes from the higher realms, the divine origin. These are just two stories about painting, but there are other stories about music, dance, things like that. Even up to very contemporary times, there are stories that speak of how all art has to be offered to the divine. Only then it becomes its purest expression. So the idea is that connection between kala or art and spirituality has been there throughout our culture. That has been emphasized. This is what I wanted to emphasize through this. So coming to Sri Aurobindo here. Yes, Sri Aurobindo has spoken about the highest and the best of Indian art. And at the same time, he realizes that it does not mean that all art in India reached at that level. But whenever, Sri Aurobindo was not only a cultural connoisseur, he was also a cultural critic in the highest sense of the term, that he gave us a theory of understanding cultures, engaging in cross-cultural studies as well. And one of the things he says is that when you look at a culture, especially one that is foreign to you, you must look at the highest that that culture has been able to produce. And for some reason, we Indians, as a result of our education, have been uprooted culturally, in the sense that we have not, through our education, found a very deep appreciation of the truths of Indian culture, or what is the highest and the best in Indian culture. So in a way, when we are studying deeper aspects of our culture, it is foreign to us for the most part. So we have to engage in this, what today's scholars speak of as decolonizing of the mind, but in other sense, the true education that we must have as Indians. So in that sense, when he's speaking of the ancient and the highest and the greatest art, what is that theory of the most ancient and the highest and the greatest art? This, by the way, is one of the very rare depictions of Ardhanarishwar in Airavateshwara temple in Darasuram, one of the famous Chola temples in Tamil Nadu, the 8-armed Ardhanarishwar. So the theory, the philosophy or the basis which was guiding the highest and the greatest Indian art was this, that the highest purpose that art should fulfill is to disclose three things, something of these three things. And Sri Aurobindo is so precise. He's saying to disclose something of three things: the self, the infinite, the divine, to the regard of the soul, that the soul should recognize something of these three things. He could have used just one word, divine or infinite or self, but he chooses three because he's going to explain what are these three. The self is disclosed through its expressions, the infinite through its living finite symbols, and the divine through his powers. So this is a very, very vast conception of the Supreme, where the Supreme is not only confined to his or her powers, not only to the symbolic expressions, the finite symbols, not only to its various expressions, but integrating all three. So to disclose something of the self, the infinite, the divine. This is the highest purpose of the art. And then he says, if that art cannot fulfill, at the very minimum, this should be done through the best of the Indian art, or the best of the ancient ways of looking at the art, or the Godheads are to be revealed. Whatever are the highest powers, the highest faculties through which the Supreme reveals himself or expresses himself through the various forms. So whether it is the Surya, whether it is the power of Shiva or the Brahma, there are not that many depictions of Brahma, but there are several, or Vishnu, or any of the Devis. They don't have to be, Saraswati, Lakshmi, and Kali or Durga, even the Gram Devi. So how would we represent, the village deities? How would those forms be revealed? So art should at least reveal these Godheads. They should, or the Godheads are to be revealed, interpreted, or in some way suggested to the soul's understanding, or to its devotion, or at the very least to a spiritually or religiously aesthetic emotion. So at the very least, art should enable this evoking of a religiously or a spiritually aesthetic emotion. The more and more art is integrated, or the more and more the artist is able to integrate the highest spiritual experiences and realizations within, his or her art will reveal more and more than simply an aesthetic emotion or a spiritually aesthetic emotion. But this is the kind of like a gradation Sri Aurobindo gives. And this is again from the Renaissance in India. There are 4 essays that we have in mind we would like to cover. Then at another place, Sri Aurobindo speaks of the identity between Indian art and the rest of Indian culture, and the complete identification of the highest motives behind that. So even when the art was focusing on the material world, and there is a lot of what today we would call as non-religious art in India, there is a lot of artistic, even in temples, you see every aspect of life being depicted. And a couple of examples are there, like, this particular thing from this particular sculpture. I'm sorry, I have some other things on my screen, so I can't see which sculpture it is. Yeah, so here in this particular image here, she's not a goddess as such. She's one of the sundaris who are depicted at, these in the corners of certain, on the top of the pillars. This is very quintessential to the Hoysala temples in Karnataka, which are scattered throughout Karnataka. And you see this kind of grace, this kind of beauty that is there. And, so even this sort of non-spiritual, non-religious expression, there was always an emphasis on some kind of spiritual motive or spiritual seeing or spiritual aesthetic emotion that it should evoke. So I'm just going a little faster because of the time. We're just being mindful of that time here. This is a painting from Ajanta, and at some point in our rest of our study circle, we will discuss specifically Sri Aurobindo's beautiful interpretation or critique of this particular painting from Ajanta. It's from, it's called the Adoration, from the Adoration group. But I have just used it here to just emphasize this aspect that, that as per the Indian artistic theory, what Sri Aurobindo emphasizes, that it's not what you see from the outside, but the true reality is that which is behind. And in Sri Aurobindo's interpretation of this particular painting, it will be revealed how he's talking about the reality that is hidden. So it's the one who has the inner vision, the rishi, the seer, the yogi, the poet, and artist. See how he's combining the true artist, the true poet in Sri Aurobindo's way of looking at arts and spirituality, have to have that inner vision, that inner drishti, which a seer and a yogi develops. And even from going back to our ancient traditions, our shastras on arts and painting and sculpture, and they speak about that the first thing is that the artist should do the dhyan, meditate on the deity that he or she wants to express or to carve through the stone or in bronze. Do a dhyan on the deity. Let the vision, let the image of the deity be revealed to you within, and then express it through your work. So it is those who see with the sukshma drishti, the inner vision. They are the ones who are truly artists in this vision. So another thing, so at one idea is, Sri Aurobindo, that reality for reality's sake is not the Indian view of art. Similarly, beauty for beauty's sake is not the Indian vision of art. So Sri Aurobindo is also very clear what if we follow these things, this idea of art for art's sake, or beauty for beauty's sake, or reality for reality's sake, we will be limiting the scope of what true art is supposed to do or can express. So beauty for beauty's sake, he seeks, that's the tyranny of the aesthetic imagination. So it can never be the spirit of art in India. We must seek beauty and always beauty, but never lose sight of the end, which India holds more important, which is the realization of the self, the Atman in things. So this self here is the Vedantic Atman, the true being that is there in things. So again, it's making very clear each and every word Sri Aurobindo uses is perfectly placed because it is supposed to express the perfect. In objects also, in matter also, there is divinity hidden, which is why, and the purpose of art is to express, even if the artist is doing a very realistic portrait of some material object, the being, the true being of that object has to be revealed through that very realistic portrait as well. So again, the idea that art has to be seen as yoga for the artist. I'm just going to stop here for a minute and remind Satya, if you can just let me know how we are doing with time.
15 minutes. We have 15 minutes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'll take 5 minutes and then I'll keep 10 minutes if, for question answer kind of, interaction thing. So art as yoga for the artist. This is another idea we find emphasized a lot, actually both in Sri Aurobindo's and Mother's writings. So in the introductory thing, I'm just going to share these 2 points from Sri Aurobindo, where he says that the artist, when he or she is creating some work of art, the true artist has to become the true yogi. Actually, that Mother says is true for everyone. Only a true yogi can be a true teacher, she said. A true teacher has to be a true yogi. She even said, to be a true wife, one has to be a true yogi. To be a good partner or a good friend, true friend, one has to be yogi in that sense. So because all life is yoga in their vision. So by yoga, the artist seeks within himself that ultimate center of knowledge, where there is a direct and utter vision of the thing that lies hidden in the forms of man, animal, tree, river, mountain. So whichever is the object of interest to the artist, the vision, the direct and complete vision of that has to be seen by the artist before he or she expresses itself. This I'm quoting from Sri Aurobindo, but you'll find the same idea in many others. Ananda Kumar Swami has spoken of that in his Dance of Shiva. You see the same idea I read in one biography of Nandalal Bose, where his student wrote about this idea of how he learned from Nandalal Bose how to look at a tree. And he would ask him again and again, but do you see the tree? Do you see the tree? Maybe if time permits, at some point, I'll share that particular anecdote. So in this way, the artist, is going within first to find that, to see that vision within and then express. So this is the yoga of the artist. And another place he says, every artist, this is sort of like a note of caution. where he says, every artist, almost, and then he says there can be rare exceptions, has got something of the public man in him, in his vital physical parts, which makes him crave for the stimulus of an audience, social applause, satisfied vanity, appreciation, fame. That must go absolutely if you want to be a yogi. Your art must be a service, not of your own ego, not of anyone or anything else, but solely of the divine. So you see, here is the vision in the first that I was just sharing, but this is the very practical, the pragmatist that Sri Aurobindo was, recognizing the human nature and recognizing the nature of the artist, the psychology of the artist. The mother in her conversations, because she had very close interaction with a lot of painters in Paris, so she has spoken about this much more candidly as to how the artists would crave for fame and what it does to their own art, and how that when the motives get mixed up, the art loses the highest purpose for which it is meant to express. So just to kind of give that points, a couple more things about Sri Aurobindo has said a lot about the chapter on Indian painting, which we will take a little closer look at some point. There he's spoken a lot about Ajanta's painting, and how that, from Ajanta onwards, certain things were lost. And then we have to also look at the time context in which Sri Aurobindo was writing. His writings ended on these topics around 1920, when he finished this series of that time. That was the time when the Bengal School of Art was at its heyday. Things moved in Indian painting way beyond that, but those are the things that are not covered in Sri Aurobindo's writings, but we'll try to bring them in through other sources as we continue with our study. But he talked about very deeply about the significance of Ajanta School of Art, and what those painters, the bhikshus, the yogis, the seers who were painting in those caves, what they were trying to express. So that, he said, which was given to the artistic conception and method by the pervading genius of Indian culture. So, like S.H. Raza, for example, has a very different expression of art. Amrita Shergill, who was deeply ingrained in the Western schools of painting, but her exposure to Ajanta changed her way of looking at painting, and especially Indian painting itself. Just a few more ideas. Sri Aurobindo says, to illustrate life and nature is only the first and primitive object of art. Indian painting throughout its history was not only based on religious themes, but always reflective of the culture that existed at the time. This not only is important because this we often think that, it's all Indian art, all Indian painting is about religion. He says, even from behind the most mundane or the most profuse depictions of human nature and culture, the Indian artist, as long as he's grounded in the Indian view of art, attempts to convey a deeper significance, a spiritual fervor, a hint of the unseen. And I'll end with this, and then we'll continue next time. What is really important is to understand the true Indian artist, the one who is steeped into the spiritual foundations of Indian culture. He or she is operating from a place of the depth, the deepest that he or she can go in. And if the artist is able to realize the true being, the true soul within, the soul realization is the means of creation of his or her art, and the soul realization must be the way of our response and understanding. So what Sri Aurobindo also emphasizes is that not everybody has to become an artist, but everybody must develop some sense of aesthetic appreciation of what is refined and what is beautiful. But those who want to go deeply into understanding Indian art, they have to follow the same process as our yogis and seers have followed, which is also the same process as our artists have to follow to go within. So to understand Indian art, we also have to go within. Only then we will be able to grasp the truth which the artist is trying to convey, either through a sculpture of, the Buddha's Mahaparinirvan from Ajanta, or a painting of Sati from Nandalal Bose. And I have a very beautiful interpretation of this particular painting also from Anand Kumar Swami, which I'll share at some point. So, again, if you just look at, he says, this is only just a beautiful Bengali woman. But when you go deeper into what this painting is trying to express, you get a whole other understanding of it. So the soul realization is the basis of creation of the highest Indian art, and soul realization must be our way of understanding the highest Indian art. So the idea of art and its close connection with spirituality is at the basis of our views on Indian art. For whatever reason, if we have left that behind, we need to recover that, because Sriaurobindo says, how do I close my presentation? Sriaurobindo says the work that is there for Indians today is to recover the true knowledge, the true spiritual knowledge that was there in our past. That is our first work in all its fields, in all its domains, in all its dimensions, and not only recover intellectually, but in all our works, in all our living. So through our project, we are trying to create a forum for people who are working in the artistic, creative fields of work, human activity, to walk along with us, to come with us on this journey as we try to restore and recover all that was best in our artistic and aesthetic understanding of life, creation, existence. So with that, I will close, except that I don't know how to close this presentation for some reason.
That for you, ma'am.
Yeah, okay, please. It kept telling me share. It didn't give me the option. So I'll stop and see if there are any comments, questions.
Yeah, they can unmute and ask questions if there is any.
I think Beluji, it's a wonderful presentation which you presented today. It gives very, deeper meaning. Whenever you read Sri Aurobindo, it is like it brings you that you are in yoga. It always leads you, whether you read his poetry or any work, somehow, it connects with soul. And, when you were talking about art, I just remember, I think I read in Anand Kumar Swami, Dance of Shiva again, I think I just trying to recollect where he talks about that one king asked one good, artist to create the sculpture. So many failed. I don't exactly remember, it is Anand Kumar Swami or somewhere else. And one artist visited that city. And, people, they used to say, this can be the model, that can be the model. So he asked king, and what can be done? He said, what kind of, sculpture you want? And whatever, king narrated, he listened to it. And then he went in one of the caves, stayed for 15 days, 20 days. King was worried that whether he is alive or not. But when he came back, and what he did was miracle for the king. What I meant by that, it is like Antardhan. Ultimately, whatever he brought out, it was not from any duplicate or replica of anything, but it was from within. And
Right.
then that is true art. So I think whenever I read about Sri Aurobindo's works, whether it is National Value of Art or Renaissance, it is something like that. It is a yoga. It is always connect. So nice presentation. It's wonderful to hear you. I request participants also to share their views. It's not only question answer, but all of you are so learned and so scholar. I would, it will be wonderful if you.
Namaste. Yeah.
Namaste. I just wanted to say the same thing, that the whole presentation was so beautifully composed, and it was each and every quote of Sri Aurobindo, as well as the explanation, was simply going in. So thank you so much, both of you. You were fabulous. Beloo Mehra presented her her presentation with pictures, and this gave us a more insight to. I think this platform is going to be quite quite a learning experience for all of us, especially what I think that we being artists work work more towards we think that we just have to work. The learning part somehow lags behind. So this is a beautiful platform to know things which we know subconsciously. There are things an artist is not able to express in words, like the ones who are dealing with visual arts, painting, sculpture. For them, words are not that they don't have that flair, or they are not into too much of reading. So these sessions would really help us to know what we are doing and what we have been doing for such a long period of time. So thank you so much, both of you. It was a wonderful session.
You can give some little introduction about yourself.
Yes, I am Bindu Popli from Delhi, and practicing visual artist. I do painting. So I'll be sharing more about myself. Or you said that we can give some write-ups also.
Yeah, please.
So maybe you'll find them weird, but it's going to be my expression. So this I'm liking that this platform is quite informal, and we'll get to know much more about Sri Aurobindo. And the best thing is that in the end, what Dr. Mehra said, that it's not only about the artist who has to become a yogi. The seer, the one who sees, or the one who understands, is also in the journey, is also on the same journey to become yogi. That's why I think this statement of Sri Aurobindo, that all life is yoga, is going to be much more clear through these sessions. So we are not much familiar with Sri Aurobindo's writings, but this all life is yoga has been a very common proverb, which is like, if you know about Sri Aurobindo, you know this line, that all life is yoga. But what exactly this line reveals? So it was quite enlightening for me. Thank you so much.